Hello, I'm Lynn Doyle. Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Doctors. Each week, we take a look at important health news, medical breakthroughs, and alternative therapies and how they may be impacting you and your family. Our aim here is to explore the facts so that you can make educated decisions. Coming up today, we're going to try to take the mystery out of menopause and give you some ways to treat a variety of long-lasting symptoms. And men, you need to know about this too.
Why is menopause? It's the time when women become roadkill because their hormones are gone, they can't have babies anymore, so we can just get rid of us. And the truth is, it's not quite like that.
We'll also be joined by neurologist and best-selling author Dr. Eric Braverman, who will give us some tips on how we can reverse the aging process of the brain and create a healthy body.
The brain basically burns up, dries up, swells up, turns to stone, rusts, gets choked by its own blood supply, and gets very old. We're basically developing dementia to some degree or another from 30 and 40 on.
And of course, we'll have our panel of doctors to answer your email questions. But first, this week's news. Here's some good news. Deaths from heart disease are dropping. From 2000 to 2010, the overall death rate from heart disease dropped almost 4% each year, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now for the bad news. Deaths related to high blood pressure and irregular heartbeats increased by 1.3% a year. In 2010, high blood pressure was a leading cause of heart-related death for those ages 55 to 74. Now they include coronary heart disease, which is caused by plaque buildup in the blood vessels, and congestive heart failure, which occurs when the heart muscle isn't strong enough. A kiss is not just a kiss anymore. It's actually sharing 80 million germs. That's right. Dutch researchers found that 10 seconds of smooching exchanges millions of microscopic living organisms. In one experiment, the researchers gave 21 couples a probiotic drink containing bacteria before they kissed. Swab samples afterwards showed the transfer of those 80 million germs. Now, the researchers also found that tongue germs were less similar among strangers kissing.
Scarlett, kiss me. Kiss me once.
But mouth germs played only a small part. There are more than 700 types of bacteria, and the body has more than 100 trillion microorganisms. They help with tasks like fighting disease and digesting our food. If needles make you feel faint when you're in the doctor's office, here's an alternative, I think. It's a small needle-like capsule that you can swallow that eliminates the need for those injections. Now, it may sound like an awful alternative to some of you, but these little capsules painlessly deliver the medicine. And according to the people at MIT who invented the needle pill, they actually are more efficient. You see, the capsule, which measures 4/10 of an inch, is made from acrylic, and it has rows of tiny hollow stainless steel needles. The pill doesn't dissolve until it gets into the gastrointestinal tract, and since there are no pain receptors there, apparently it doesn't hurt. So far, though, it's only been tested on pigs. The American Heart Association's crackdown on eating yolk-rich eggs, once thought to clog the arteries, has now been lifted. New clinical studies show eggs have almost a modest effect on cholesterol levels. These days, there's more emphasis actually on the influence of dietary fat on our cholesterol. The federal government agrees in its dietary guidelines for Americans that eating an egg yolk per day does not result in increased bad cholesterol. In fact, a breakfast of scrambled eggs will probably have a better impact on your overall cholesterol levels than a bagel or a bowl of that sugary cereal. People with atrial fibrillation, that is those who have an irregular or rapid heartbeat caused by poor blood flow, may be doubling their risk for dementia if they overuse anti-clogging drugs such as warfarin and Plavix and even aspirin. You see, that's because too much anti-clot medication may raise the chances of tiny brain bleeds that over time might raise the risk of dementia, according to this new research. The effect is of particular concern in patients using more than one anti-clotting drug. Past studies have shown that low-calorie diets reduce the risk of heart disease, hypertension, and stroke. But new research shows it also has a beneficial effect on some 900 of our genes that are linked to aging, lifespan, and our memory. Researchers at NYU Langone Medical Center showed how diets with fewer calories derived from carbohydrates can deter some aspects of aging and chronic diseases in mammals, including we humans. We're actually going to be discussing this new study and brain health later in the show. A revolutionary stroke procedure to remove blood clots in the brain has gotten a very special endorsement from former South Carolina Governor Jim Edwards. He credits a daring new experimental procedure for bringing him back from the dead after he suffered a massive stroke last summer. Our Newsmax deputy health editor, Nick Tate, tells us more about this so-called medical thriller. Nick?
Well, Lynn, you know, Governor Edwards' story really does read like something out of a Robin Cook medical thriller. Like most stroke survivors, he had no warning at all before he suffered a sudden and frightening stroke last summer. In the middle of the night, he collapsed and fell to the floor, unable to move the left side of his face or his body. Now, his wife Ann rushed to his side but couldn't get him to speak or respond. "Smile at me, Jim," she said at one point. No reaction from the governor. "Wrinkle your forehead," she said, but he could only stare blankly at her. So Ann called an ambulance, recognizing that he was probably suffering from a stroke. And you might say that Jim actually had two great strokes of luck that night, Lynn. First, his wife happens to be a retired nurse, so she knew what to do. But secondly, the doctor on call at the hospital that night, Dr. Imran Chandri, decided to perform this revolutionary new stroke procedure on the governor. Now, the new technique not only saved his life, but offers and holds tremendous promise for the tens of thousands of Americans who suffer a life-threatening stroke every year. Instead of giving the governor a clot-busting drug like TPA, which is the standard treatment for stroke, Dr. Chaudhry performed a standard angioplasty, placing a stent in an artery in his neck to open up blood flow to his brain, but also did something called a thrombectomy, which essentially involves vacuuming out a second blood clot that had formed in the governor's brain. Now, the governor, who was awake during the entire procedure and evidently asking lots of questions, recovered quickly and completely from it, and today, at age 87, he says he feels as healthy as he ever has and believes that the new medical treatment is really something of a medical miracle. Now, I spoke with Dr. Chaudhry recently, and he says that the governor's case spotlights how promising this experimental approach will be for future treatments of stroke.
Can you explain the procedure for us and tell us why it in fact is so promising?
Sure. You know, conventional stroke treatments typically involve clot-busting drugs like TPA, but they're only effective if they're given within the first 3 hours of a stroke's onset. The vast majority of patients, somewhere in the order of 96% by some estimates, don't get to a hospital in time to benefit, so they often suffer serious brain damage that can either leave them disabled or kill them. But with a thrombectomy, patients can benefit even 12 hours after the onset of a stroke, and perhaps even longer. Now, what happens to perform the operation, doctors thread a tiny catheter through the artery in a stroke patient's leg, thread it up to the brain, and once it's there, a small device suctions out the clot in fragments, restoring the blood flow and preventing permanent brain damage. What's remarkable is that patients are awake through the procedure, like Governor Edwards, and they can participate, talk to the doctors, and see what's happening. Dr. Chaudhry said that he can actually see his patients recover from a stroke after the clot is removed right in front of his eyes, right there on the table. So it's pretty incredible. Now, the procedure is delicate. It's not for everybody. It's not for all stroke patients, and it is still considered experimental by the FDA. But Dr. Chaudhry and others believe that that will change as more research is done to confirm its safety and effectiveness, and as more success stories, like Governor Edwards' case, are documented. It certainly seems very promising, Lynn.
It certainly does. Nick Tate, thank you very much. And finally, Meet the Doctors would like to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Here are a few simple steps that can help keep your weight under control and still have you enjoying the turkey and all the trimmings. First, just remind yourself how awful it feels when you overeat. And don't panic, because you know there will be leftovers for the next day. You don't have to eat it all at one time. Also, speaking of eating, eat breakfast so that you're not ravenous when you do finally sit down at the family table. And one more thing, decide whether you're going to have the dessert or you're going to have a glass of wine. You want to avoid the creamy holiday drinks because, of course, you know that can save you hundreds of calories. And remember, always exercise. Perhaps go for a brisk walk after that big feast. Your turkey should be the one that's stuffed, not you. Up next, Menopause, it happens to every middle-aged woman, and it still remains shrouded in misinformation. We're going to talk to two experts in the field, and guys, we want you to listen up because this segment is just as important for you. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Lynn Doyle. You know, women all go through menopause at some point in their lives. Some struggle with night sweats, hot flashes, loss of libido, mood swings, and weight gain. Here to unveil the mysteries of menopause and how to cope with them is Dr. Alyssa Dweck. She's an OB/GYN at Mount Kisco Medical Group in Westchester, New York. We're also joined by our very own Dr. Erica Schwartz, an internist with a private practice in bioidentical hormone therapy and prevention. She also writes her own Newsmax health newsletter, including her latest, Menopause Mysteries Nobody Ever Explained. Well, they're going to now. Doctors, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you.
I want to start with you, Dr. Schwartz, and offer our congratulations. A grandmother not once, not twice, but 3 times in the last couple of months.
Yeah, right, in 6 weeks. Twins. Well, it's good because it's all estrogen. It's girls. It's twin girls and another girl, my 2 daughters. So very exciting. Thank you so much for remembering.
Well, we are very pleased for you. And of course,
Thank
one of the
you.
great things about menopause is that it often means that you are at the age where you can become a grandmother. So we're going to put a positive spin on that. How about that? Menopause literally means the change of life. And our bodies really do change. How so?
Right. So I think, first of all, it's really important to understand that menopause is not a disease, okay? It's a natural state that we all go through, and I think we have to think of it that way so that we don't make it so scary and taboo of a subject.
Let me ask you about that because you obviously are clarifying it for a reason. Do patients come to you with the concept that they are suffering from a disease if they're going through menopause?
Well, I don't think it's the patients. I think it's the media. It's our culture. I think we've been listening for decades to the fact that menopause was something really bad. You know, we don't talk of puberty as being something bad. So adolescence, right? Why is menopause? It's the time when women become roadkill because their hormones are gone. They can't have babies anymore, so we can just get rid of us. And the truth is, it's not quite like that.
Gosh, I hope not.
Well, it certainly isn't, obviously.
Let's talk about menopause and what it actually means in terms of what your body experiences.
Yes, so by definition, menopause means a time where you have not had a menstrual cycle for a full year's time. It also means that you're depleted in estrogen because your ovaries are no longer producing so much estrogen or any estrogen at all. You no longer can get pregnant, therefore contraception is no longer needed. And some women really suffer with a gamut of symptoms from menopause, but I think it's important to know that some women have absolutely no symptoms at all, float through, and you really never hear about them.
And there's also a term, perimenopause. What's the difference and the definition of perimenopause?
Well, there are a lot of terms, and it would be great if we actually eliminated the terms. It would be really the best part of it. Perimenopause is really around menopause. It's premenopause, postmenopause, before menopause, after menopause, around menopause. This is the thing. Menopause is a medical term that we were actually trained in medical school, 1 year without a period. The truth is that the symptoms of loss of hormones start up to a decade, if not earlier, before you stop having a period. So if we eliminated the term menopause and we dealt with the symptoms and what's going on with our patients and women, as we are women in general, then we probably would do a lot better because then you're right, it wouldn't be a disease. It would be just, okay, there's some changes we're going through. How are we going to address them?
Let's talk about the changes and give people an idea of what some of the so-called symptoms of either perimenopause or menopause would be.
Right, so this is a transition. It doesn't happen from one day to the next. As Dr. Schwartz said, it could really occur over a period of 10 years of time. Many, many women will complain of hot flashes, night sweats, difficulty sleeping, weight changes, mood lability, decreases in their sex drive, and the like. So these are common symptoms that people will complain about.
And what, if anything, can we do, or do we just suffer through?
I don't think we should suffer through anything. I mean, if this happened to men, do you think we would suffer through anything? Seriously. No, there's no reason to suffer. First of all, it's a matter of identifying what the cause of the problem is. Instead of just treating a hot flash, is really finding out what's causing the hot flash. Is the hot flash caused by the fact that you're now dropping your estrogen? Is it because, are you getting PMS because you're not making good enough progesterone? Are these issues going, are you gaining weight because your thyroid is low? All of these things are happening at the same time.
So should we just make sure that we talk to our doctors about this and not just accept that, oh, I'm at a certain age, I have to take on the weight gain, I have to deal with the night sweats, I'll just have to live and grin and bear it?
No, there's no reason to do that. And I think it's time because, women are afraid of hormones because they've been intimidated by a stupid study that really turned out not to even be true, the results of the study in 2002. So the thing is, what you really want to do is really encourage women to not accept grin and bear it as a concept. It's time for us to actually enjoy the quality of life that is wonderful and not get sick as we get older, which is what I do for a living. I prevent this, and I've learned it.
You mentioned the controversy. You're talking about whether or not people should take hormone replacement therapy.
Right, and it depends what kind of hormone replacement therapy, because not all hormones are created equal. The hormones studied in this controversial study are less safe than estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, which are identical molecularly. They look like the hormones we actually make. So those hormones are safer. And there's also the thyroid issue, which is totally overlooked because the American Endocrine Society actually manages not to address the fact that there's an epidemic of low thyroid in this country. So when you treat women correctly, then their cholesterol goes down, they don't get sick, they feel much better. And the other thing about hot flashes, which I think is so important, is that there is scientific literature that connects the frequency of hot flashes to the incidence of heart disease in the long run, over 10 years or so. So women die of heart disease. They don't die of anything else, really.
Okay.
So if you prevent them and lower the incidence of hot flashes by giving them medication, hormones to lower the hot flashes so that they get rid of them, they'll feel great.
Okay, I have to take a quick break, but before I do, can you answer this simple question? What advice would you give to men whose loved one is going through menopause?
I think communication is essential so that women communicate with their male partners, spouses, or whatnot, and let them know they're going through some changes so that they will be prepared.
And we should point out that men go through menopause as well, but that's another topic for another show. We have to take a quick break. The doctors are going to be back with us later in the show to answer some of your questions. But coming up next, we are going to talk about your brain health and what you need to do to keep it as healthy as possible. Stay with us for that. We baby boomers can't naturally avoid getting gray hair or wrinkles, but what about preventing the brain from aging? Dr. Eric Braverman is a best-selling author, and he says we can do just that. He has a 6-step program for preserving and improving memory at any age. He's going to tell us about that in just a moment. But first, Nick Tate joins us to give us the upshot on the latest scientific research into reversing the mental aging process.
Well, hey, Lynn, I think it's fair to say that Dr. Eric Braverman is one of the nation's leading figures in the practice of mind-body medicine. And I happen to know from his new book that he has a favorite saying that medical science has made the remarkable anatomical discovery that, for most people at least, the head is firmly attached to the rest of the body. It's a joke, of course. But it also underscores the serious point that he makes that a healthy diet and a healthy body can have a dramatic impact on both the healthy function of our brains and the quality of our lives, particularly as we grow older. Now, Dr. Braverman has spent 25 years exploring the connections between physical and mental health and come up with a simple test to help determine how best to maintain the right balance between mind and body, primarily by modifying your diet with foods and natural supplements. Now, he's treated thousands of patients in his practice using his untraditional holistic approach, and his message really couldn't be more timely for today's baby boomers, Lynn. You know, just this week, a new study came out projecting that the number of people with Alzheimer's in the U.S. will more than double by the year 2050, and the cost for caring for all those folks could hit $1.5 trillion every year. That's nearly 1.5 times what we now spend on all health care costs in the U.S. today. And those figures add up to a troubling future, Lynn, unless we can figure out better ways to combat Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia right now.
Thanks, Nick, and that's exactly what Dr. Braverman hopes to do with his 6 steps and his 40 years of dealing with the mind-body connection. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much. My first job in the brain was 17 years old at the Princeton Brain Research Center. And my license began in 1984, and I've been devoted to brain research literally since 1976, when my mother convinced me the brain was my most important organ. I wasn't as certain then, but I've learned that it is over time.
And I would say that you agree today that it certainly is the organ that we need to preserve
It's difficult to teach a lot of men that, but women generally believe me.
And particularly when you hear numbers like Nick just reported, that by the year 2050 that we could have as many cases of Alzheimer's in this country. It's frightening.
We have to understand what really happens to the human brain. The brain basically burns up, dries up, swells up, turns to stone, rusts, gets choked by its own blood supply, and gets very old. We're basically developing dementia to some degree or another from 30 and 40 on, losing basically 7 to 10 milliseconds or 7 to 10 miles per hour on our fastball. So we start at 100 miles an hour at 20, and by 30 a guy might throw 90 miles an hour, and by 40, unless he's taken or cheating with growth hormone, testosterone, and steroids, he's throwing 80 and 78 miles an hour. In some ways the brain's the same way. It loses that speed, but what people didn't know until we developed a 3T MRI, which is 15 times more special at looking into the brain than a 1T, a regular MRI, we see lots of atrophy from 30 and 40 on, lots of early dementia, loss of metabolism, loss of energy in the brain, and then people forget, their judgment's impaired, they're driving, all these car accidents that we're having, all these mistakes that we make, all these memory errors, they're like our computers that get filled up with spam and make errors.
So you're seeing this physically, you can see where the degeneration is occurring. Have you been able to come up with something that can either halt or at least slow down that degenerative process?
Of course, and in fact, the degree in which we can mask the process and repair the process is now equal to plastic surgery. So we all know that virtually any eye disease, any double chinning as we get, in my case, graying, can be colored out, fixed out, repaired out, and massive amounts of skin damage, sun damage, burn damage is repairable. Guess what with the human brain? It has atrophy in the pituitary. We either replace the hormones, repair it. We have sections of the hippocampus, which are memory centers. We come in with curcumin, bilberry, lutein, vitamin C, DHEA, estrogen, and we adjust all the hormones because the brain is connected to the body, most people are delivered head first, the same way a baby's delivered.
Let's talk specifically about those 6 steps so that we can give people at home advice quickly on what they can do to reverse some of this aging process in our brains.
Okay, well, the first step in my mind to do, and I don't know if you have the 6 steps listed in a particular order, but the first step is always to look at your weight. It turns out that obesity is very dementia causing. And so fat even. So there's a lot of thin, fit women that are thin, flabby, or what we call normal weight obesity. They have normal weight, but they're still obese because they're not fit. You have to sleep. All right, you go through, first of all, weight is dopamine dependent, adrenaline dependent. Sleep is serotonin, sleep and mood. You got to sleep 7 hours. The principles of great medicine are not known in this society, so I'm going to give you the principle. The principle is that the brain controls the body as God controls the earth. You're only as young as your oldest part, and every healing requires a knowledge of hormones, drugs, nutrients, and lifestyle changes.
We're going to continue this conversation. We're going to invite the other doctors back to answer some of your questions, so I hope that you'll stay with us here on Meet the Doctors. We'll be right back. Thanks for joining us once again for Meet the Doctors. I'm Lynn Doyle, and this is the part of the program where you do actually get to meet the doctors. We are joined once again by Dr. Erica Schwartz, Dr. Alyssa Dweck, and Dr. Eric Braverman, and they have very graciously agreed to answer your questions, and we always appreciate your input as well. Let us know what it is that you'd like to talk about. So we want to talk about this new study that just came out by NYU Langone Medical Center that essentially says if you eat less, you'll live longer. We always talk about eating healthy and following a good nutritional diet. Is there any sense that if we do eat less that we will live longer and age better?
Well, there's some studies that eating less is obviously helpful to living longer. It depends what you're eating less of. I mean, if it's white flour, sugar, junk food, saturated fat, greasy meats, or whatever the case is, then some individuals will obviously live longer. Plus, diet has to be adjusted depending on the medical condition. There's a gout diet, there's a fibroid diet, there's a heart disease diet, there's a cancer diet, there's even a skin cancer diet. There are dietary factors in everything.
So talking about a high-calorie diet, when you talk to women who are going through menopause and their body seems to be slowing down, their metabolism seems to slow down, how do we characterize those two and have them work together?
I don't think we're talking about high-calorie diet. I think what we're talking about a diet that's well-balanced. There are 1,000 studies that show that people who eat low-calorie diets live forever. The only longevity studies that show that you can live longer are connected to lower calories. But the quality of life stinks. So what we're talking about, and I think that's what Dr. Braverman's trying to say, is that what you want is a well-balanced caloric diet, and you want to balance people's hormones so that they can feel good, so that they can be productive, and that life is positive and enjoyable, high quality till they're 100.
So this is basically the same thing that we learned as kids, to eat the food pyramid and to exercise every day and to sleep well at
But
night.
it's the wrong pyramid.
And that you'll do well.
No,
We
it's the
learned
wrong
that as
pyramid.
teenagers, though.
I think moderation is key. You can't be so radical and avoid all sugar, all white flour, all white rice. Fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, and smart fat foods are important. And I think you'll get your calories in.
And it's not the pyramid. It's not the original pyramid, because that's wrong. It's the pyramid, it's actually the balance. And it's a balance that, as Dr. Dweck just said, is about high protein, high quality vegetables, and good fats.
One question that we have from a viewer involves sleep, and all three of you addressed sleep earlier in the show. So it's obviously something that's striking a chord at home. I'm having trouble sleeping. What can I do? I'm feeling the impact of it throughout the next day. Any suggestions?
Yeah. Find out why she's not sleeping. And if she's not sleeping because she's menopausal and she's got no hormones, you balance her hormones. You get her thyroid balance, adrenals, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. She will eventually sleep. Also adjust her diet. Stop drinking alcohol. Stop exercising late at night. Stop drinking caffeinated drinks. Don't eat processed foods. You'll sleep.
Dr. Erica said so.
There's a very complicated thing, sleep, in terms of longevity. Individuals can't always stop the caffeine because they need that for fatigue in the daytime, and they may have to stop it up to 2 o'clock. Some individuals have a really simple view of how they're going to age. Most individuals that are staying high output, that want to keep being creative, are going to have back pain at different times causing sleep disorder. They're going to have to know how to use Tylenol, Ecotrin, Neurontin, ibuprofen, Advil. They're going to have sinus problems as factors in sleep, steam issues in terms of dry nose and irritated nose and sinuses throughout the winter. Dust issues, allergy issues, relationship issues, sexual issues, progesterone
you
issues.
could actually be
Right.
overwhelming the audience.
Well,
They
we
need
don't
to be able to
overwhelm the audience.
kind
What
of
we want to know is they really
signify
have,
one or the other.
They need to get a sleep IQ. As you get older, a sleep IQ means you need to do a knowledgeable check of your life. Have you exercised enough to be fatigued? What is your sexual life like? What is your hormonal life like? What is your mood disorder like? A lot of people have aging brains in which they have low-level antidepressants that will help you sleep at night and improve your memory and your mood.
Okay.
I just want you to understand our sleep experts are not knowledgeable enough in nutrition. They're not knowledgeable enough in hormones. They're not knowledgeable enough in exercise. And so they have trouble putting together an entire sleep package. That's what I want everyone to get a sleep IQ.
I'd like to just mention something that's really vital right now with all the electronics and iPads and phones. Get the electronics out of your bed, because that's definitely going to impair sleep,
Everybody
no
put them
question
on.
about it.
Right.
Sleep hygiene's important. Make the bedroom a haven for two things: relations and sleep, and get
It's
the
interesting
iPad out
that
of
you
the
say
bed.
that, because the people who say that they sleep with the TV on don't really sleep, and that's one of the suggestions that we could make really easily. Just turn that TV off, and also turn off all of
And they
these
start as
electronic
teenagers.
devices.
They start
do.
as teenagers
Right.
sleeping with the TV on.
All right, on that note, we'll take a short break. Don't turn this TV off, because we're coming back with more of your email questions. So stay with us. Meet the Doctors will continue right after this. Let's get right back to answering your email questions with our panel of doctors. Here's one for Dr. Dweck and Dr. Schwartz. Since I've reached menopause, losing weight and even maintaining the weight seems to be a losing battle. I just don't know what to do apart from starving myself or going on a crash diet, which we just heard is probably the worst thing that you can do. What suggestions would you have for this viewer?
Right, so starving yourself is definitely not the answer. Smart diet, moderation, avoiding things that may be really just empty calories, and stick with water for drinks, fruits, vegetables, fiber that fills you up, and get that satiety really going. In addition, exercise, both cardio and strength training. Both are really helpful, number one, to burn calories, but also to build muscle and enhance your metabolism.
How do I know if and when I'm in menopause and whether or not I'm a candidate to take hormones?
Everybody's a candidate for hormones, actually. And it's not about being in menopause, it's about losing your hormones and either having symptoms or being at risk. Family history of losing your bone density, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, issues that are related, heart disease, all of these hormones will help. So pretty much everybody is a candidate for hormones.
Okay. Dr. Braverman, I sometimes forget people's names or where I put my keys, but I'm doing a lot better than most of my friends. My cousin just had a brain scan that shows amyloid collecting in the brain. Should I get one of those scans? Is that something everyone of a certain age should do?
The amyloid scans are very interesting to me. I like PET scans and 3T MRIs and brain maps better because it tells processing speed. Amyloid alone doesn't tell me enough. I want to know if the brain has atrophy and everything else going on. It shrinks and it loses parts and it has blockages in the circulation. I can see pretty much anything in the brain, and I'm not certain yet the amyloid scans are precise enough, but it's interesting to me.
So
in
can I
terms
just
of,
walk in and ask
No,
for
the
a brain
doctor-
scan?
No, unfortunately, the really good brain workups are not yet standardized, but they should include a 3T MRI, a brain PET scan. Amyloid would be the last scan on the list, in my view. A beam or brain electrical activity map, memory scales, cognitive impairment scales that are done. There's a whole host of attention scales. Most people with attention problems are just anxious and that they're trying to stay and go fast. They're forgetting their keys because basically they refuse to give in to aging, and their willpower is very strong. In terms of the people who can't lose weight, I just wanted to say one thing. Bariatric medicine is all about using a medication to lose weight. There's an American Bariatric Society that prescribes Tenuate, Phentermine if people can't lose weight. And there's no question that the metabolism's damaged. You have to take a drug sometimes.
Okay. Speaking of drugs, here's a question. My husband is 60 years old and recently had a stent implanted. He was put on Plavix and also takes supplements. Recently, we noticed some mysterious bruising on his body. What do you think could be causing this?
Possibly the Plavix and the interaction between the supplements that he's taking and the Plavix. So he should go to the doctor and have his blood count and his bleeding profile measured.
I'm a 49-year-old person who's gone to the doctor twice for an EKG after having experienced chest pains, dizziness, shortness of breath, and nausea. Last time I was told I was having a panic attack. Is that a possibility, or is my doctor wrong? I know that that's a very general question, but how can you differentiate, I guess, from a panic attack and a true heart problem?
A panic attack is usually more of a diagnosis of exclusion. So you really have to rule out other more dangerous medical conditions, a pulmonary embolism, a heart attack. Perhaps this person should go back to the doctor or have a full cardiology workup with a stress test, etc., in order to make sure all is well, and then we can write it off as a panic attack and
a lot
maybe
of times
consider
it's
medication.
even GERD and it's back pain and EKG, but most individuals it is a panic attack. But you can look more deeply with CT angiogram that tells you coronary calcium now, and very sophisticated heart scans, and it's always good to take advantage of a panic attack and turn it into information, meaning what kind of heart disease do you have? Do you have reflux? Do you have back pain? Most people are getting short as they get older. Their backs are going like that, like an accordion.
No
They're
T-spine.
getting their belly's going out, and it's a great opportunity to repair yourself before your health breaks.
You know, that's interesting that you say that, but when talking to the average viewer at home, what they probably hear is test, more test. I'm afraid of all these tests. I don't know where to start. So how do we alleviate some of that fear and that confusion?
You listen to the patient. You have a doctor who actually listens to you, who cares about you, who wants to hear the details of your life and doesn't run to testing, but rather decides if something makes sense in the context of your life.
So if I'm having a stomach problem, for example, I think to myself, I have no idea which doctor to start with. Do I go to my general practitioner? Do I find an internist? Is it a specialist? And I think that's what intimidates a lot of people that we're trying to educate here on this show, so that they can have a practical piece of advice to take with them.
You want a primary care physician that you have a relationship with.
Okay.
And I think that the problem with all the insurances and all this insanity that's going on is that the relationship between the doctor and the patient, which is the most important relationship if you're going to be okay, has been eliminated. So we want to bring that back. And it's about connecting the doctor to the patient.
Okay.
This gets back to the main issue of what primary care should look like in the 21st century. We're all walking around with iPhones. The 21st century primary care center has to be a head-to-toe computerized ultrasound physical with brain health checkup and brain tests in every office. The current primary care doctor functions like a shoe shine boy and a shoe leather place that looks at these small little offices with just an EKG and a PFT, and they do one little specialty. Every patient in the United States needs a head-to-toe computer exam and proper testing, and you find the oldest part, and you're only as young as your oldest part.
Okay, great advice. We're going to end it there. Dr. Braverman, thank you so much. Dr. Dweck, nice to have you with us. Always good to have Dr. Erica Schwartz with us as well. And most importantly, thank you for joining us. Until the next time, stay happy and healthy. I'm Lynn Doyle for Meet the Doctors.